Okay, fellas, get home alive. Your get home bag. We talked about different types of packs, gray man, and tactical type bags, and then we talked about basics of navigating yourself from point A to point B, basic navigation using maps and so on to get yourself home. We talked about basics plus on medical stuff to keep your feet in good order and so on. Basic hygiene. You know, this could take you anywhere from a few hours to get home, or it could take you 2 or 3 days, depending on how badly things are, right? So these are the things that we need to think about when we're putting our bag together. We talked about shelter, how you need to keep that to a minimum. Your first shelter is always your clothing that you're wearing, but keep your shelter system to a minimum. You don't need a lot of weight to hold you back. And talked a little bit about seasonal loadout, spring and summer versus autumn winter. Autumn winter is obviously going to be a heavier loadout. So now we're going to move on to water. So you should always carry in your get home bag, you should always carry water. Even if you have a water filter, you should always start off with a minimum of 2 quarts of water, minimum. That's minimum, okay? 2 quarts, 2 liters. I use those terms interchangeably because they're so close. So, you want at least 2. And that's to get you started. Depending on how far it is, 20 miles, you know, a couple of quarts should last you, you know, just plod on, you know. Don't breathe through your mouth as much as you can, because that's how you dehydrate, through your mouth like that, more so than through your nose. Okay, so if you breathe through your nose, you're losing less water through your nose if you breathe through your nose. So breathe through your mouth, you're going to dehydrate faster, and of course your mouth gets very dry. Okay, so we want a 2 quart minimum. Now, with our get home bag, we have some options. Depending on how much money you have to invest and so on, it always comes back to money, right? I mean, you gotta have some money to invest in this stuff. And the best stuff to invest in is quality stuff. Okay, so when you're getting your kit, any type of equipment that you get, you want to get the best quality that you can afford. All right, because the cheap stuff is going to fail on you. That's just the reality. Okay, so you might get, while you're on the move, you might have a water bladder, a 3-liter water bladder with hose, so that you can drink that on the move. If you take a rest stop or you're sleeping overnight, right? You're going to remain overnight somewhere. You found yourself a safe place to hole up for the night, and you're going to take a second day to get however far you need to get. You want to have 2+ quarts in the bag. Okay, I generally will recommend military canteens, and you can also use some smart water bottles to integrate, say, a Sawyer filter. It screws right on top of the smart water bottles. We will discuss a bunch of that stuff at the very end of this whole series. We're gonna get a pack and we're gonna discuss a lot of these things at the end of this series. Okay, so you got to figure out about how much water you may need for your situation. If it's going to be a multi-day, you may have to think about where are you going to resupply your water. Because obviously if you're walking, you're going to intake more water than if you were just, you know, riding around in a vehicle. If you had a vehicle that was powered, there was no EMP, for instance, but there was a situation where you couldn't use your car, or maybe you could use your car, but there is a situation where you do have to get home because it's a natural disaster or something, right? So you're going to drink less water if you're in a vehicle or you're riding a motorcycle or anything like that, right? There was no EMP, but you're on an electric bike, okay? Something like that. So you'll drink less water because you're not powering yourself from point A to point B. Now, if you're going to eat on the way, so this is where we start talking about water and food and fire, and we start talking about these things together. If we're moving from point A to point B, we got to have enough water, especially if we know we're going to be 2 or 3 days. We got to have enough water to not only to drink, but we're going to have water possibly for food consumption. So if you have dried, dehydrated meals, you may need water for food. And speaking of fire, you also may need some way to prepare food. If you are using a basic canister stove with a very small canister, a 100 gram or 200 gram canister, something like that, with a very small stove, this is something else that you need to consider. So if you need water for your body, water for food, because when you eat food, you need water, okay? And then if you do dehydrated, then you're not only going to need water, but you're probably going to want to heat that water. So you'll need a small stove. A little canister stove is perfect for 2 to 3 days. Okay, very small. Of course, you also have to decide if it's safe, because a stove can make noise. There's smells. There is obviously a flame that people could see. You have to take these things into consideration. Daytime, nighttime, all of that has to be taken into consideration. We talked about thermal signature with the shelter a little bit. You also have to think about your thermal signature with these other situations, okay? Some of these things we're talking about worst case scenario, right? So you have to think about best case scenario to worst case scenario. Worst case scenario is that it's hit the fan and you've been trying to live a somewhat normal life up until the very end, and now It's really hit the fan, and you have to be careful of everything that you do. So this is the spectrum that we're working with here, right? That's a wide spectrum, from completely calm to totally A's and A's, right? So, do you know what I'm saying? A's and A's, right? Or A's and E's, yeah. A's and E's, right? So, yeah, so right here, we're at water. Our options are, depending on how far, is also good depending on how much food we may carry. We'll have open and eat, right? Like ration bars, say power bar, clip bar, things like that, right? Open and eat. So we'll have open and eat, but then we'll also have option of ration packs. So if you have dehydrated rations, you're going to need water for that. So 2 quart minimum. And then we're going to need a way to get water. If we run out of that 2 quarts, we may want 2 quarts in the get home bag, and then a 3 quart bladder with hose. That's 5 quarts, right? So that's totally a minimum. And then other options, we could throw another 2 quarts in there if you have a decent size get home bag, but not huge. Okay, we talked about size the other day, right? Medium size. But also you got to consider weight. You're also going to have to consider your plan to get home. You should have already mapped out beforehand. If you work in the same place all the time, you already should have found places that you can get water along the way. You should have also scouted out places that you could possibly hole up in an overnight, and all that. So you need to do all this basic reconnaissance before it hits the fan, so that you know what to do, where to go, when to do it, and so on beforehand, right? So you gotta map all this stuff out beforehand. So if I say, well, I can get by with 2 quarts of water walking home minimum, but if it exponentially gets worse, where can I get water, right? So you need to think about that. You need to think about all the places you can get water, and possibly have a water filter, a good one, like a Cadden or a Sawyer. Survivor filter is a good one. Then you need to think about your food, and then you need to think about other things. We're going to come back in the next video, and we're going to discuss more of this. Okay? See you there.